Week 1 has people absolutely shook, and what we are about to see is a lot of bad trades that happened this week. Do not be this person. But in that spirit, what we are trying to do is acquire some high value targets before week 2 fantasy football. So it's going to be important to keep that in mind because these guys we're going through today, we are trying to capture some panicked owners right now. But I'm doing everything I can to get us ready for week 2 fantasy football now. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now let's get into our first guy right here, which is going to be Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons here. Now, Drake London actually didn't have like a terrible week in week 1. Like if you look at Drake London's production just in fantasy football alone, he had 13.4 fantasy points on 8 catches for 54 yards in a full PPR format. So obviously it wasn't like he was a complete bust for your team. But considering the draft capital that was used to acquire a guy like Drake London and the output that he did not really get close to doing, and the expectations of what people had for week 1, including myself, which was that this was going to be a high-scoring matchup where both offenses were able to put up points on each other, I would be willing to bet people come away disappointed with this performance from Drake London. But there's a couple big things that you need to keep in mind when it comes to London and why you should trade for him. So number 1, Drake London led the team at the wide receiver position in targets. He had 14 total targets in that game. The next closest guy was Casey Washington at 6 targets, and he actually ironically outsnapped Drake London 72-67. Now, this is nothing that you want to actually look at and say, yeah, that's going to be a factor moving forward. I do not believe that Casey Washington is going to push Drake London for snaps on a weekly basis. I think the moment Darnell Mooney comes back, for example, he may push him out of the equation. But the fact of the matter is here that there's metrics that would indicate that Drake London is going to continue to be the wide receiver 1 on this team without question, and he will absolutely come back and give you dominant fantasy football performances. Because one of the most important things to always keep in mind, especially after week 1, when people have bad games, always look at the usage of those guys. If the usage is down, that's where we can worry a little bit. But if the usage is high, then that's where you don't need to worry, and it was just a bad game, and you need to understand that. Because when I'm looking at the snap count percentage on fsroundup.com, which is free access, by the way, to this information right here, you can see that his snap total is 67, and his targets are at 14, leading the position in targets and only second by 5 snaps behind Casey Washington. Drake London will be this team's wide receiver 1 always and every time. So there's no real reason to worry. So if I'm cooking up trade ideas on this one, right? I want one of the ideas that you should consider to be someone like Courtland Sutton and James Conner for Drake London and Bill Krosky, because there's a couple things that you need to know when you're heading into week 2, when you're trying to trade with somebody. There's going to be people that are still going to hold on to preseason rankings and draft capital at this time, but there is an element where you can throw a little bit of the rankings out of the equation and the draft capital after a bad week 1 performance here. And you also want your trade partner to feel like they're also getting the edge on you in the trade. So when I look at somebody like a Drake London over a Courtland Sutton, I think most people would still agree, even after Drake London's kind of bummer performance, that Drake London is the better option than Courtland Sutton. But what you can take away from it is that someone getting James Conner for you in exchange for Bill Krosky, that's going to feel like a win to many, many people. When ironically, that's not a win. James Conner's usage was very low in week 1 as opposed to Trey Benson, who was very, very close to him in a lot of metrics that I actually highlighted on my waiver wire video just a couple hours ago. So this one is not as big of a win as a lot of people would feel, and this feels like a trade that could actually go through. Now, the next guy that I want to go through is going to be Ashton Jeanty of the Las Vegas Raiders right here. And listen, Ashton Jeanty was extraordinarily inefficient. Like, he did get in the end zone, literally that saved his bacon on an otherwise ugly week for Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty literally did not do much aside from get tons of volume, which I did say before the week that he would get tons of volume and it would not be a great matchup for him. He had 19 carries and 2 targets, so 21 total opportunities here for 38 rushing yards and 2 receiving yards. 40 yards on 21 touches. That is gross right there. He was terrible on an efficiency basis. But here's the secret. I said this before the week started. New England was going to be a tough matchup for Ashton Jeanty. Always and every time. I don't care if they won that game, which they did. That was a tough matchup for Ashton Jeanty as a rookie to go on the road to New England to face that defense with Mike Vrabel. That was a tough matchup. But again, look at the usage here. This guy had 54 snaps opposed to Zamir White only having 9. He had 19 rushing attempts and 2 targets. That's over 20 attempts in week 1 alone. And the RB usage here, this guy dominated at the goal line. He dominated in short yardage. He dominated in the 2-minute drill. So those are all scoring opportunities there that Ashton Jeanty is getting. You cannot look at this New England matchup and apply it to his whole season and assume that, yeah, he's going to average 2 yards per carry. Grow up. Like, that will not happen every single week. So to me, when it comes to Ashton Jeanty, a guy who was already falling in drafts towards the end of August, what I would try to cook up here is Breece Hall and Jakobi Meyers for Ashton Jeanty straight up. That's what I would personally do. Because again, you want the guy you're trading with, or the girl, whatever, to feel like they're getting a leg up on you in some way, shape, or fashion. Because rankings and draft capital still matter to a lot of people at this point in the season. So with Breece Hall, this is a guy who did really well on every single touch and was the opposite of Jeanty. He got plenty of work, but he was also extraordinarily efficient on doing that. And then Jakobi Meyers also got plenty of volume as well, but we both know is not a very high upside type of player in fantasy football. Whereas Ashton Jeanty in certain weeks will be a 25, 30 plus point fantasy scorer, and more often than not, a plug and play option for you. Whereas with Breece Hall and Jakobi Meyers, they're not going to be those types of guys. And again, these are just ideas that I have and something that I would probably try to cook up myself. But if you do want to get my full opinion on what your team looks like, what trades we can make, and how we can move the needle for your team moving forward, you can go to FS Roundup, and if you sign up for that premium tier subscription, I will personally give you a full team breakdown after your 12-day free trial ends here. So what you're getting with this premium subscription is a full breakdown from me, the automatic waiver wire tool, which is legendary in the fantasy space. You're getting my 260 rankings on a weekly basis. And the reason I'm doing team breakdowns is because I love you guys and you guys have been great to me. So I appreciate you guys. And if you want that team breakdown so we can analyze it together, go to fsroundup.com and sign up over on the site. Now, getting into our next guy, this is a great example of what I said leading into this. High-profile guy, because in all likelihood, I will be honest, you will not get Jamir Gibbs in a trade. But I think it's well worth the shot right now, because Jamir Gibbs, along with the whole Detroit Lions offense, was very concerning in week 1 versus Green Bay. And this is something I alluded to as well. And there's a lot of yahoos out there that owe me an apology on this one, because this offense without Ben Johnson looked gross in Detroit. Jamir Gibbs' efficiency was the worst we've ever seen from him. He had 9 carries for 19 yards, and he had 10 targets for 10 receptions for 31 yards. We are talking about getting 50 yards on 19 total opportunities here. That is like way worse than anything we've ever seen. Now, the other thing that people may be concerned about, and this is the reason I think there's a possibility, not because Jamir Gibbs had a bad day. Everybody has bad days. The reason why I think people could panic on this one is because Dave Montgomery had more carries than him. He had 11 compared to Jamir Gibbs' 9, and he also had 4 targets in this offense. So realistically, if you watch the game, you'll know that Jared Goff was under duress for the majority of that game, particularly with Micah Parsons, who was a boom acquisition for them right away. Jared Goff was under tons of duress, and we know he's going to check it down. So whatever back was in the backfield, he was checking it down to. But if we go over here and look at the RB usage as well, Jamir Gibbs had 42 total plays, 42 total snaps compared to Dave Montgomery's 23. So he's basically getting 2 times the amount of snaps as Dave Montgomery was just based on week 1. Jamir Gibbs also out-touched him at the short yardage situations. 4 plays compared to Dave Montgomery's 3 plays. And if you look at third downs, that's when they were both even right there as well. 5 plays for each player. So there's metrics here that would also concern the Jamir Gibbs owner, while we look at it opportunistically and say to ourselves, this was a fluke game and they will figure it out with one of their best offensive weapons here. That's the way you should look at it. So again, you may not get this one. I doubt you're going to make this one work. So you may as well throw something out there. What I have cooked up is Chase Brown and Garrett Wilson for Jamir Gibbs and Ricky Pearsall right here. Now, you don't feel like you're getting a win in this one, but I'm just looking to see who's panicking big time on Jamir Gibbs. I am not saying this trade is going to go through, but Chase Brown is not a player to squawk at, and Garrett Wilson is, in theory, a better pick and a better guy to have on your roster than Ricky Pearsall is. Where actually, in reality, I don't know if that's going to be the case long season. So I still think we'd come on top on this one. So again, Jamir Gibbs is probably the most unlikely guy that you will get on this list right here. But the bottom line is, before week 2 fantasy football, we're trying to capitalize on the people who are significantly panicking right now. And believe me, they are out there. Do not do this trade if you have Jamir Gibbs. But if you don't have Jamir Gibbs and you want him, this is something I would consider doing. Now, the next guy I think is actually way more acquirable. The last two guys in particular. So the first guy I want to talk about is Tet McMillan of the Carolina Panthers. I think that he is a really good trade target to get. Now, the irony in this is that I never was really big on Tet McMillan as a prospect. Like, I have significantly risen on Tet McMillan since week 1. And full disclosure, I said he was a great play in week 1, and he was okay. Like, it wasn't terrible. He had 11.8 fantasy points per game. He had 8 targets, 5 receptions for 68 yards. But the reality is, outside of Chuba Hubbard, and the only reason he was good was because he got in the end zone at the end of the game. Outside of that, it was not a good matchup. And no Panthers really did well in fantasy football. Now, Tet McMillan, I think, is going to concern people because, again, if you caught wind of any of that, Bryce Young looked not very good again. Like, he looked a lot like he did at the beginning of last year. Not completely dysfunctional, but he looked like he took a step back a little bit. So really, people may just be thinking, what's the long-term upside with Tet McMillan? I didn't draft him particularly high, so what would it take to just move off a guy like this? I think for you, it's a great opportunity because what we saw here is Tet McMillan, first of all, was the clear wide receiver 1. He had the most snaps in that Carolina offense, 53, and the next closest was Xavier Legette at 50. He had 8 targets compared to Xavier Legette having 6 targets in that game. And what we also saw is that this team is not relying on Xavier Legette to be some sort of breakout player this year. I don't think that's going to happen. So when Jalen Coker comes back, that's the real only target that he's going to have to fight for. This offense will run through Tet McMillan on the passing game. So to me, it's a great time to buy. I would send a trade like DK Metcalf and Chuba Hubbard for Tet McMillan and Bucky Irving. Now, again, it may feel like a complete overkill trying to go for someone like Bucky, but that's my first idea because Bucky Irving and Chuba Hubbard weren't that far off in week 1, and you would also feel like you're getting the win if you get DK Metcalf in exchange for Tet McMillan. Maybe not the hardcore fantasy player, but the casual fantasy player probably feels like DK is the better option here. I'm telling you right now, Tet McMillan is the guy that you would want at the price that I believe you could get for him if you actually tested it out this week. Now, the last guy that I want to go through is another rookie here as well. And on Friday, he just didn't look that great, but he got so much work. Omarion Hampton of the Los Angeles Chargers, I think, is a great trade target before week 2. Now, with Omarion Hampton, as I just alluded to, the guy basically got so much work out of the backfield. Like, we saw what the true usage is going to be. Omarion Hampton had 52 total snaps in this game, compared to Najee Harris at 12 and Hassan Haskins actually at 1. So this guy clearly is going to be the lead back right out of the gate. They're not going backwards with this one. This is a first-round pick that even with theoretically a healthy Najee at this point, they're not going to all of a sudden make the switch and go backwards and say, yeah, we're actually going to give our first-round running back less work. That's not going to happen here. Omarion Hampton dominated on early downs, short yardage. He got all of them. He got the goal line carry as well, and he was out there more than Najee on third downs as well. 9 plays compared to Najee's 2 plays. In every facet, Najee Harris did not do nearly as much as Omarion Hampton. And of course, most people saw this game. It was a standalone game on Friday night. Great game to watch, by the way. But Omarion Hampton in fantasy just didn't come away with that much. Omarion Hampton had 15 carries for 49 yards. Like, that's just over 3 yards a carry right here. And 2 targets, 2 receptions for 13 total yards. So Omarion Hampton's day was very disappointing. But I also said this before the matchup as well. Omarion Hampton with Kansas City that week That was a tough matchup in Brazil. Now, the Chargers did great passing the ball, but you know for a fact that Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman are going to do everything they can to get this rushing game going, and they'll have a lot more success against inferior opponents, unlike the team that they just played with the Kansas City Chiefs, because defensively, that was the only thing they could stop, was the run game. So for me, I'm looking at a Breece Hall again and Michael Pittman for Omarion Hampton's situation. This does not feel out of the realm of possibilities whatsoever. Omarion Hampton is the better back for fantasy moving forward than Breece because we know the breakdown that Omarion Hampton will get, and we also know he's on a better offense. While the Jets looked good, and they did, they will not be as good of an offense long season as Omarion Hampton's Los Angeles Chargers will be. And same thing with Pittman. Pittman and the Colts are going to struggle as well, but he popped off because of the Colts popping off against the Dolphins here. So this actually feels like a pretty legitimate trade that I think a lot of people would take this week ahead of Week 2 fantasy football. So let me know who you are trying to acquire before Week 2 fantasy football. And if you want to see the best waiver wire additions before Week 2, click on this video right here.